Welcome back to the Game Changer Unlocked. I'm here with Erwin McManus. In our final segment, we're talking about, what separates great leaders really from everybody else. And, one of the things, Erwin, that I wanted to ask about is self-awareness of, is so important for leaders that want to grow. And you've kind of talked about the mind shift and kind of how they've got to think a little differently. But, being self-aware as a leader, can you kind of talk about the importance of that?
Sure. Brian, one of the things we have in common is both of us use a lot of psychometrics. We design different assessments and help people become more self-aware. And the reason this question is such an interesting one is I think the reason psychometrics are both fascinating, valuable, and popular is because we have a diminishing level of self-awareness.
Hmm.
When we lived in tribes, we had really, really high self-awareness because the community would tell you what you're good at. You're going to be a hunter. You're really good at hunting. You're not very good at hunting. You're going to be a farmer. And you're neither good at hunting or farming. And you're going to do this. And they would help you in that community discover what your gifts and talents are, or help develop those gifts and talents necessary for survival. Once we move out of our need for survival. And the reason this is important is my wife one time said to me, "Do you think humans are capable of anything?" And I said, "I think humans are capable of anything necessary for survival."
Hmm.
And so the moment it's not necessary for survival, we lose its capacity. So now that we have cell phones, no one can remember a phone number because we don't need those phone numbers for survival. We literally lose our mental structural capacity when it's no longer needed for survival. And so it's one of those interesting things. So self-awareness is essential for survival. And what I find is interesting is when I give someone any assessment, doesn't even matter which one. The only thing I'm looking for at first is whether it resonates with them.
Hmm.
I will have a large number of people over the years who would say something like, "This thing is wrong. This test is wrong." I said, "It's not a test, it's an assessment. You can't fail. You can't fail this." you know,
Right.
and
Right.
And they go, "Yeah, but this isn't who I am." And then I'll say to them, "Well, then we have a dilemma. So here are the only options. See, this assessment doesn't have any artificial intelligence of its own. It doesn't have the capacity to tell you anything that it doesn't know about you. It only tells you what you know about you. It only tells you what you said about you. So if you think the response of this indicator is wrong, it's either A, you lied about yourself. So let's figure out why you lied about yourself because you lied to yourself about yourself. Or B, you don't know yourself. You told the truth. And when you're looking at the truth, it doesn't look like you in your mind's eye, which tells me that you are low on the spectrum of self-awareness. And what's really fascinating is I remember one time I gave an assessment to a person who was a extremely high. I wouldn't say he's a narcissist, but he had all the narcissistic personality structures. Because we have to remember that these psychological designations aren't actual real things. They're descriptions of human patterns of behavior, thought, and internal structure. Now, this guy was an Olympic skier, and I thought he would be really upset when he saw his assessment. And he looked at it and goes, "This is exactly who I am." And and I actually really respect that guy because he has such high self-awareness. He knows exactly who he is. And that's actually what's more dangerous. And so part of the reason self-awareness is so important is you can't grow
Right.
if you can't see yourself. You cannot grow if you don't know yourself. You cannot go somewhere if you do not know what the starting point is. And so I don't know if your audience is familiar with Wayne Chappell, your I guess business partner. And I remember one time because I actually asked Wayne. I'd never interacted with anyone in the world as my coach for a moment because I coach people all over the world,
Right.
and I went through a really traumatic situation, and my wife said you should go talk to someone. So I asked my assistant, by the way, go find me the best in the world. Find me somebody who works with like Navy SEALs or works with the top 1% in the world. And she came back with Wayne. And And at one point, Wayne says something. He's very diplomatic, at least with me. And he said, "Has anyone ever like diagnosed you with?" And then he kind of went and I said, "No, but are you diagnosing me as that?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, yeah, kind of." And I said, "Wayne, you're not going to scare me. Like I just turned 67 years old. There's nothing you can tell me about me that I don't have a little voice in my head saying, you know that you're this."
Right. Right.
And so when someone says, "Hey, do you know that you are what ADHD inhibited with hyper focus?" I'm going, "You don't think I'm aware of the fact that I can write a book in 10 hours, but it takes me 10 years to write it?" You know? And, that I was running 5 companies at one time and I was still bored. Like, you know, and and one of the things that with self-awareness is that you can actually be the most powerful version of yourself if you know yourself and actually learn to be comfortable with the assets of who you are. And then you work with the liabilities. One of the things that Wayne said to me, he goes, "You're very low in assertiveness." And it's funny because one of my highest values is kindness.
Mm,
And I made a determination probably 40 years ago that I wanted to be the kindest person in the world.
wow.
But every virtue you take on has an Achilles heel if you misapply it. And I realized, oh, my high value for kindness, I saw such cruelty, also diminished my need for assertiveness. And so since that conversation, I've been pushing my assertiveness up because I realize, oh, I can still be kind and be assertive. It's so hard for me to say, I want to eat pizza tonight or I want Chinese. There, even in simple little decisions every day, if I feel like it might make someone unhappy, it's like brutally painful for me. Except when I'm in my leadership mode, then all of a sudden it doesn't matter. and but I realize that, and I think that this is why self-awareness is so important. Because if other people know you better than you know yourself, they don't know how to help you. They don't know what to do with you.
True.
And if when you can see yourself well, then you can decide, I like myself, I'm good with where I am, or I want to change and grow. And at this stage of my life, and I just turned 67 last week, I have so many areas of my life that I'm so excited about growing in. So many areas of my life I go, oh, there's just so much room for growth, so much potential to live at a higher and more optimal level. And and am I willing to take on the discipline, to take on the internal structures, to elevate even more in my life? I wouldn't be able to make those choices without self-awareness. And I think it's really, really important.
One last quick question. I think it could be quick. When you'd mentioned somebody, when you tell somebody something they probably don't want to hear, or kind of shy about like getting the answer to something, how do most people react when as a leadership coach when you say, "Hey, I think you are X," or I see these qualities. What's the normal reaction, or is there a normal
You
reaction?
mean when you're telling us something positive or
Yeah,
something
or
negative?
negative, or both. One of them. I'd probably say something negative more so than positive.
It depends. It's interesting because if you have a person with a high level of success who lacks self-awareness, what happens is they have huge financial success, organizational success, but their people success is a zero.
Mm.
They leave a trail of blood all behind them. Their marriages are a disaster. Their kids hate them, and they don't understand why their family doesn't appreciate them as much as their stock value appreciates them. And so a lot of times when I work with someone, it's very hard for them to see themselves. It's really difficult. And that's why, I mean, one of the great privileges I've had in my life is to work with some of the most successful people in the world and, getting paid 6 figures to coach them. And the only real value I bring is that I'm not afraid to be fired, is that I'm going to tell them the truth. And and the ones who want that truth, they need that mirror because they refuse to stay where they are. they're the ones that really make tremendous progress.
That is so true. When you can give advice or you can make decisions where there's no fear behind it,
Yeah.
that you're not worried about what somebody says or the outcome, you can be very direct and very honest and be, I think, a lot more effective without question.
Yeah. I think that's why it's so hard in marriages. One of the hardest reasons that marriages struggle is that it's hard to tell your partner the truth because you're afraid of the outcomes of that truth, even if it's spoken in love and kindness. Yeah, because you're afraid of a negative outcome. So you're not willing to take the risk to get the most positive outcome.
Mm.
Because the most positive outcome comes when you are honest with each other and have an authentic relationship. So many times we choose a lesser relationship to avoid the fear of consequence and conflict.
Wow. Erwin, thank you so much for your openness and the wisdom today. You've definitely remind us that true leadership's not just about perfection, but self-awareness and courage to kind of make a transformation from the inside out is the way I would kind of look at it. Uh, for our audience, remember that leadership begins with a mindset. The way you think shapes the way you lead, and the way you lead really shapes the impact you leave behind to others. I'm your host, Brian Fetzer, and this has been the Game Changer Unlocked. Until the next time, keep unlocking your potential and leading with purpose. And make sure you check out Erwin McManus. Uh, Absolutely some incredible wisdom there. To the next time, be blessed.